Okay, so now it's the time to start module number 2, in which we are going to focus on Administer, Governance and Compliance. This is a module which is also connected with cloud security. So like the previous module in which we have taken care of identity, in this we are going to focus on compliance and governance. So let's get started. In this module, we are going to focus on describing the core architectural component of Azure. Then we are going to focus on Azure Policy and initiatives associated with that. We are going to focus on securing our Azure resources with role-based access control. Role-based access control or identity access management, IAM, is actually one of the most important topics of security associated with Azure Cloud. We are going to understand these concepts, and then in this module we have two different labs. So we are going to focus on both the labs after this. The first lab is going to focusing on managing subscriptions and role-based access control. Practically we're going to see that. And then second one is focusing on managing governance via Azure policies. So let's start with the first thing, which is describe the core architectural component of Azure. In this case, we are going to focus on different components of Azure which are very important for anyone to understand Azure Cloud properly. It includes regions, Azure subscriptions, subscription usage. We are going to focus on creating resource group, determining service limits and quota, creating Azure resource hierarchy, where basically resources will be inside resource group will be inside subscription, and subscription will be under management group. This hierarchy is what we need to understand. We are going to focus on applying resource tagging, as well as we will focus on managing cost also. This is a very introductory basic module, so I strongly recommend you go through this. But if you already know all these concepts, you are feel free to skip this thing and you can move ahead with the next thing. Okay, so let's start with identifying Azure regions. I hope you all know that Microsoft Azure Cloud is actually having 60 plus regions across the globe. As you can see in the slide, we have a world map in which each blue dot which you're able to see is actually a region where Microsoft is going to have one or more Azure data centers. So remember one thing, these data centers are there, and all the data centers are actually physically connected through fiber optic undersea cables. Now you can actually go through this particular link which is visible on the screen, which is focusing on Azure regions. Now this link is actually going to show you that how exactly all these regions are actually connected and which regions are actually available with multiple data center zones. Now you can see right now we can select a region which is close to our users. So basically when you have 60 plus regions, do not get confused with this. You can select the region which is close to your users actually. Also, there are global services which are available, and that are region independent services which are also available with that. So basically there are a couple of services in Azure which are not limited to a specific region. Those are global services, and it can actually help you to somehow load distribute and connect with multi-region kind of a deployment with that. Now, if you want to understand in depth about regions, you should surely check out this link, which is actually showing you that all this data centers and all the regions are actually visible in this globe. Now in my case, instead of the globe, I'm actually going to change it into a viewing mode to map. And when we go for the map, you can see all these dots are actually showing you different kind of things which are available on Azure infrastructure. Now let me just get rid of all of these things, and if I just focus on regions, it's actually showing me those 60 plus regions which are available in Azure Cloud. Obviously, to know more details about this, you can click on a specific region and it's going to show you that which region is this, what kind of location it is actually having and all. Now, sometimes the UI of this particular website is not that good. So when you click on that, it's going to show you this kind of issues with that. But I think most of the time when you click on this, it's going to give you a proper UI associated with that. So it's showing me right now that when I click on this, this is a region which is in South India. And same way, there are other regions also which are available in different parts of the world. So this is a region which is East US, this is East US 2, this is North Central US. And whenever you're dealing with this, remember all these lines which you're able to see are actually those undersea fiber optic cables using which these regions are actually connected. And we also have a concept which is called paired regions, which is like every region is going to be paired with one another region. So basically all the regions are somehow connected in pairing, so that in some kind of a disaster and all, if one of the region is down, at least the data is going to be safe in the other part of the world in the different region. So it's a very important concept. Try to check out this particular link and just see how you can deal with the regions afterwards. Now let's talk about Azure subscription. I already told you this thing that Azure subscription is basically a logical unit which is going to focus on Azure services which are linking to your particular account. And Microsoft use this thing for billing purpose. So basically your security and billing boundaries are going to be taken care by Azure subscription. When you have a Microsoft Entra ID or a tenant kind of a directory, most of the time under that directory, you're going to create more than one subscriptions. Depends upon the targeted audience or depends upon your project structure, you can actually create multiple subscriptions, and based on that, you can get consolidated billing. As you can see in the slide, we have Azure account, which is having maybe 3 different types of subscription associated with that. First one is dev subscription, second one is taste, while third one is a production subscription, in which maybe we are going to deploy our prod related resources. Now, this slide is actually talking about subscription usage. Whenever you're going with Azure subscription, remember, most of the paid subscriptions are going to require a credit card information. And once you validate your identity with the help of credit card verification, then only you will be able to use Azure subscription. Do not worry, when you go for an account like free account and all, they won't charge you anything from the credit card. But afterwards, once your $200 of free account is actually consumed, then after that, you're going to pay from the credit card information. And that is a plan which is known as pay-as-you-go kind of a model, in which Microsoft is going to charge you monthly basis based on the usage of the cloud which you have done. You can also go with some other additional subscription plans, like you have CSP, cloud solution providers, and basically they are the partners associated with cloud solution. And you also have enterprise and student level subscriptions which are available. Now, if you are a working professional for any organization, most of the time your organization is going to provide Azure subscription, and you don't need to worry about subscription or billing associated with that. But if you're individual, you should check out which one is going to be matching with your requirement, and based on that, you can go on with the Azure subscription. How can we obtain a subscription? This is a very simple process actually. Obviously, when you are using a subscription, if you're going with the free subscription, you can just start a free subscription by going to azure.microsoft.com, and then you can just register by providing your basic identity details. If you are taking a subscription for partners or from a reseller, then obviously according to that, you have to configure your cloud services and other configurations of the subscriptions with that. Or maybe if you're an organization, you can go with enterprise level agreement for the customers, and based on that, you can actually maybe going to make some kind of an upfront monetary commitments, because in Azure subscriptions, we have a couple of reserved plans. We will see that thing when we focus on costing part, but that is also something which is available, and those kind of upfront monetary commitments is what you're going to do when you're going with the enterprise level plans and subscriptions. Hey guys, sorry for interruption. My name is Maruti and I'm here to make a very important announcement. I hope you are liking our videos and you're doing a continuous learning with us on an Azure Cloud and AI related topics. If you are enjoying this thing, I'm going to announce SkillTech.club, which is our upcoming website, which is going to be launched very soon. We are here to tell you one thing, that everyone who is a subscriber of this particular channel will get Azure Cloud and Azure AI related certification courses free of cost in SkillTech.club. So you will be a part of the SkillTech.club kind of a membership automatically free of cost. And everyone who's a subscriber of this particular channel will get those benefits which are available in that. So what are you waiting for? I request you to please subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends and families if they are also interested in Azure Cloud and AI learning. That's it from my side. Now you can carry on with your learning. Thank you. Next, a very important term of Azure Cloud is resource group. Throughout this course, we are going to use resource group at many places. Remember guys, resource group is nothing but a logical grouping of multiple Azure resources. Now, maybe you're going to create a resource group where you're going to have multiple types of resources, like one database, one app service, or maybe some kind of a virtual network inside one single resource group. Now, that kind of multiple types of resources can also be inside one resource group. Even as I said, resource group is a logical grouping. There are chances that you're going to have a resource group with multiple resources which belongs to different geographical regions. So this is not a physical segregation. This is not a physical group. It's a logical grouping. Why do we create a group and then we keep the resources inside that? Well, that is actually a structure which is followed by Azure Resource Manager. So when you do this thing, it's actually going to allow you to organize your resources properly, and it's also going to help you to delete multiple resources inside the resource group in a one shot. So basically, you have to group resources which are actually sharing the same life cycle. Maybe it's going to be deleted at the same time because maybe those group of resources you have created for a particular client or for a particular project. Remember, any point of time when you have resources inside a resource group, you can move resources between one resource group to another resource group. That is 100% possible. One more thing which I want you to notice right now is in every subscription, you're going to have the section which is known as usage and quota. There are a couple of resources which are actually giving you limited usage associated with that. Like you can see in this particular slide, we have a couple of quota name in which we have regional CPUs available for that particular region. You can see that for West Europe, we have 100 CPUs. For East US, we have 100 CPUs, out of which we have used some of the CPUs associated with that. Now, obviously, there is a limited quota available in each region based on your subscription type. So whenever you want to increase quota, you can actually make a request for a support, and then you can actually request for an increased quota, and Microsoft is going to approve or reject based on the customization which you're applying in that. Most of the time, if you ask for an increased quota, it is going to be available, but that is totally depend on what type of subscription you're using. Now, after all these things, let's understand how exactly Azure resources are going to be organized. We understood this thing that we have something called resource group, which is actually going to have multiple resources inside that. So remember, the hierarchy always says that resources will be inside resource group. But then above resource group, what is exactly going to be there? Well, in above resource group, you're always going to have subscriptions. And that is what this slide is actually trying to show you. You can see in this hierarchy, the rootmost thing is actually subscription. All the golden key icons are actually nothing but different types of subscriptions which we have. This kind of subscriptions will be grouped into something called management groups. And those management groups are also going to be further grouped into some root level management group. Basically, if you are an organization, you're always going to set up one root level management group first. Under that root management group, either department wise or maybe geography wise, you're going to have further management groups available inside that. When you're doing this thing, you're actually trying to replicate your organizational hierarchical structure with that. Based on that management group, you can maybe create multiple subscriptions under that, and then same way, you are going to give different kind of a user assignment to a specific subscriptions. Now, when you're going to do this thing, management groups are actually going to provide a level of a scope above the subscription. And that is why this is something which is going to be managed by organizations. While under a particular subscription, everything is going to be managed by the users who are actually going to use cloud resources. Also remember, you can actually apply different kind of policies at the subscription level. You can also configure budget spending, and you can also take care of the inheritance down the hierarchical structure whenever you're going to do role-based access control kind of an access management. We are going to see those things. That's the reason we are understanding this hierarchical structure first. There is one note which is given on the slide, like to prevent changes, apply resource locks at the subscription, resource group, or a resource level. We are going to see resource locks in depth in the coming modules. That is very important when you want to create some kind of a read-only resources, or you want to prevent deletion of the resources. You should apply this kind of a locks associated with those resources, and you can do it at any of these three levels: subscription level, resource group level, or a resource level. Next, we have tags. Now, tag is one of the most underrated service associated with Azure. Every time when you create an Azure resource, you can actually do tagging. Basically, resource naming and tagging is something which is very common best practice which is available here. Most of the time, these tags are going to provide an additional metadata for your Azure resources. And this is going to help you to logically organize your resources. It's nothing but a name value pair. And you can later on use this name value pair to either search that specific resource, or maybe for a consolidated billing also, you can get that thing. As you can see in the slide, you can give any kind of a name value pair for resource tagging. But in most of the resources, this is something which is optional. That's the reason most of the time, no-ICE users are not going to apply tags on the resources. But this is surely a best practice to go on with. Now, after all these different concepts associated with Azure, let's move on to the next thing, which is Azure Policy Initiatives. In this particular module, we are going to start with implementing Azure Policy, and we are actually going to focus on multiple policies associated with that. We'll talk about how we can create and configure and manage Azure policies. And obviously, as I said, we have a separate lab also associated with this. And then we are going to see that where exactly we can use Azure policies. Now, if I want to focus on policies first, let me tell you one thing, that Azure Policy is nothing but a service which we can configure, assign, and manage to a specific resource level. So maybe a resource group, or a subscription is actually going to have this kind of policies applied on that. Most of the time, these policies are going to run evaluations and is going to scan for non-compliant resources. You can configure different kind of policy configurations, because hundreds and thousands of policies and policy initiatives are actually available under Azure umbrella. So let's say if I simplify this process to explain this, let's say in your organization, you want to restrict that there should be some kind of a security related compliance standard has to be followed. Or let's say there are certain level of virtual machine sizes are only available, and those are certain virtual machine sizes only your organization developers and infrastructure people should use. If you want to create this kind of a compliance policy and you want to make sure that this policy has to be applied on a different level of your subscriptions or resource groups, then you can use Azure Policy for that. Basically, the advantages of Azure Policies are straightforward and simple. It's going to help you in enforcement and compliance. It's going to apply policies at scale, because you can apply this thing at different level, and it's going to be helping you with remediation. Now, there are some of the use cases which are visible on the slide, and I just want you to go through that thing. Like you can see, I have given you one of the thing like allowed virtual machine SKU, which is there. So let's say you want to specify a set of virtual machine SKUs that your organizations can deploy, and all other SKUs will not be allowed by anyone. And whenever they try to do that thing, the Azure Policy is automatically going to block that, and then maybe it's going to count it as a compliance issue, and it's going to highlight that thing in the monitoring service. This kind of multiple things can be there. You can use from this hundreds of policies which are available, or if you want, you can create your custom Azure Policy also. Now this slide is actually trying to show you that how exactly you can create Azure Policy. Most of the time when you want to create an Azure Policy, every time policy definitions are going to be grouped into something called policy initiative. Remember, the word initiative is very simple. Policy initiative is nothing but group of multiple policies. Most of the time, hundreds of policies will be grouped into one particular policy initiative. When you want to use policy initiative or a particular policy, you're going to select that, and then you can assign these policy initiatives either at your management group level, subscription level, or the resource group level. And then you can also customize this thing with the help of access compliance associated with that. So basically, you choose or you configure policy, and then you just assign the policy at a different scope level is what you have to do when you want to take care of Azure Policy. Now we are going to do a specific lab associated with this thing. So that's the reason we are not going with in-depth right now. But very soon, exactly after this, you're going to see lab number 2A and 2B, in which you're going to focus on Azure Policies practically. Now let's start with the next thing, which is securing Azure resources with Azure role-based access control. This is undoubtedly one of the most important topic of security of Azure. Role-based access control is basically going to help you to assign different kind of roles to a specific resource group or a resource, and based on that, you can actually control who can do what kind of things. Basically, if you are familiar with security, then I'm sure you know authentication authorization. Role-based access control is basically a cloud-specific mechanism to take care of authorization. We can create role definitions, we can create a role assignment also, and we can assign the role to a specific user, and we can also apply role-based access control kind of an authentication with that. Now all these things we are going to see based on our Entra ID roles and based on our role-based access control roles. So basically, when you talk about roles in Azure, we have two different kind of roles available. The Entra ID roles are exactly something which is known as administrative roles. So when you go at the Entra ID level, you're going to get administrative roles, which are only applicable for most of the administrative related tasks, while role-based access control roles are actually going to be applicable on your subscription, resource groups, and resources. Basically, in these levels, you're going to use different kind of roles, which are known as role-based access control roles. Let's not get confused. When we are going to see this thing practically, you'll understand that. Also remember, you can have a built-in roles, as well as if you want, you can create a customized role also. That is 100% possible. This slide is actually showing you the comparison between role-based access control roles and Entra ID roles, or the other name of this thing is administrative roles. Now you can see as it is compared, Azure role-based access control roles, RBAC roles, are actually going to help you to manage access to Azure resources, while Entra ID roles is going to help you to manage access at the Entra ID object like users, groups, and other things which we discuss. The RBAC roles are going to be scoped, can be specified at multiple levels, level, resource group level, or even subscription level. While Entra ID roles are always going to be applicable at the tenant level. The last point which we need to discuss is in Azure RBAC roles, the role information can be accessed in the Azure portal as well as in Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, Azure ARM templates, and REST API as well. On the other hand, your Entra ID roles are actually going to be accessed with Azure portal, Microsoft 365 admin portal, and Microsoft Graph PowerShell only. So basically the role information access is also something which is different. Now let's have a look at how exactly we can actually create a new role definition. Remember, we have most of the time the common roles like owner, contributor, and reader. Now this is showing you that most of the roles are nothing but collections of permissions that are going to be list the operations that can be performed. Like they are showing you in the slide that a contributor role is actually having multiple actions associated with that. Whichever actions which are allowed or denied is actually something which is going to be combinedly creating this kind of a role. Now there are hundreds of built-in roles which are available, and if you're not happy with that, you can also create a custom role. This slide is talking about creating a role assignment. So role assignment is basically a process of binding a role definition to a user, group, or a service principal at a scope of the purpose of granting access. Now you can see the topmost tile here is actually security principal, which can be a user, group, or service principal kind of a thing. Basically, this is going to give you a unique identity of a user or a group of the user, or maybe some kind of an application or service which will come under service principal. When you are dealing with this kind of a security principles, you can assign a role definition to a particular role. Let's say you are assigning a role which is backup operator or security reader or maybe contributor. When you're doing this thing, the role assignment is going to happen either on a particular resource group or a specific resource. So you have to choose the role definition, you have to do the role assignment at a particular scope level. This simple 3-step process is what you have to follow. And based on that, at a particular level, you will be able to assign that role successfully. Now this final slide is actually talking about managing access to Azure subscription by using Azure role-based access control. Now this is applying role-based access control authentication at the root level of your root management tenant. Now you can see we have a tenant, and under the tenant you're going to have root management group. Under the root management group, you're going to have management group, and then under the management group, you are actually going to have your subscription, resource groups, and resources. The whole hierarchy is actually visible here. If you want to apply access management at the tenant level, then maybe you're going to use administrative roles for that. And that's where you can see in the first box, we have global admin, application admin, or application developer kind of roles available in that, which all are administrative roles. But exactly below that, when you go to root management group or management group kind of thing, or maybe resource group and subscription kind of a thing, all are actually Azure role-based access control roles. And from that point onwards, you're actually going to do access management with role-based access control. With this, we are done with this particular module. So it's a time to move on to the labs. As I said already, this particular module is actually having 2 labs. So we are going to focus on first lab number 2A, which is managing subscriptions and role-based access control. And after that, we're going to focus on managing governance via Azure Policy.